They thought I'd always live in her shadow. They made it sound like she was the destination and I was a detour. Her laugh echoed at dinner tables, while my silence was mistaken for absence. She was celebrated. I was tolerated. They rewrote my story before I ever had the chance to tell it. They said I didn't want enough, that I didn't chase enough, that I didn't try hard enough. But it wasn't failure. It was something bigger, just not visible yet. I was building something no one could see. Not yet. Not until it unfolded right in front of them. And by then, it was too late to pretend they hadn't doubted me. The moment was already on screen. Her bragging paused mid-sentence. My name appeared beneath his. And for the first time, she went quiet. Hi, I'm Emily Carter. I'm 32 years old, and I live in Portland, Oregon. This isn't a story about revenge. It's not even about proving someone wrong. It's about seeing yourself fully, even when the people closest to you refuse to. And it's about the moment I realized I didn't need their applause. Because I had already found something better. Something louder than their silence. Something undeniable. My sister's name is Claire. 3 years older. Ivy League graduate. Flawless skin. Polished speech. Claire was the family jewel. The golden girl. The one everyone talked about when guests came over. She wore her life like a resume. Curated, checked, stamped with approval. Married at 28 to a clean-cut finance executive named Ryan. They had a wedding that looked like a Pinterest board exploded into real life. White flowers. Handwritten vows. A string quartet. And me? I held the guest book. Because when Claire shines, you don't compete, you dim. At least, that's what they expected. That I'd settle. That I'd aim lower. That I'd never become someone worth mentioning at the dinner table. Someone like Ryan. Ryan, who drove a Tesla. Ryan, who shook my father's hand with confidence. Ryan, who knew how to pronounce Kiani and never used ketchup on steak. Ryan, the man Claire bragged about every chance she got. Especially when I was in the room. Oh, Ryan just got invited to speak at the Chamber of Commerce next week. Did I tell you Ryan's firm is flying him to Tokyo? Ryan's been mentoring a whole new class of associates. They just adore him. Ryan said Emily should consider temp work in marketing. Might help her figure things out. Every sentence felt like a jab, gift wrapped in faux concern. I never argued. I never corrected. Not even when her assumptions were wrong. Not even when I had something worth saying. Because I knew. One day, she'd see. Not in a fight. Not in a screaming match. But in the quiet clarity of truth. When her voice trailed off, not because I asked her to stop, but because something undeniable appeared. Something like the TV screen. Something like my husband. Standing behind a microphone. Wearing his usual dark denim, sleeves rolled to the elbow, hair just slightly messy. He wasn't quoting stock trends. He wasn't pitching to investors. He was talking about impact, about the documentary our team had worked 2 years on. About real stories. About dignity. About the voiceless being heard. And he said something else. None of this would have been possible without my wife, Emily Carter. She's the reason this vision exists. She believed in stories when no one else would listen. And just like that, the room froze. I'll take you there. But first, I need to show you what came before. The silence. The invisibility. The assumptions. And how I walked through every moment, quietly. Patiently. Purposefully. Until the moment she finally... When I was growing up, there was a path. A neat, glittering path paved by my parents' hopes and Claire's example. Get good grades. Get into a top school. Study something that makes sense. Medicine, law, finance. Find a stable job. Find a respectable man. Start a family. Host holidays. I didn't hate the idea of that path. I just never really saw myself on it. I was the kid who'd draw for hours instead of playing outside. Who asked questions no one had answers for. Who found comfort in silence and chaos in structure. But try telling that to a family that loves certainty. Claire was easy to understand. She was linear. Logical. Valedictorian. Early admissions to Yale. Internships with city mayors. She came home with leather planners, neat schedules, and press suits. People listened when she spoke. She made sense.
Me?
I was the art major, the creative phase, the daughter who went to NYU and came back confused, the one who drifted through internships, did short stints in nonprofit work, and tried to freelance full-time. She's just taking a break, they'd whisper when I skipped Thanksgiving one year. We don't talk about that anymore, when I left a startup project 6 months later. Maybe she's finding herself, when I took a part-time job at a coffee shop just to pay rent. But I wasn't lost. I just wasn't where they thought I'd be. I wasn't climbing a ladder. I was digging.
Deep.
For something real. Something I could plan in. Something that could grow with me. Still, it's hard to explain that when your parents keep comparing you to a polished mirror named Claire. At dinners, she spoke of mortgages and investments. I stayed quiet. At birthdays, she gifted leather journals and custom wine boxes. I brought hand-drawn cards and scarves I dyed myself. I remember one moment, vividly. Christmas Eve. We were all seated around the fire at my parents' house. My mom was serving dessert. Ryan had just shared a story about meeting the governor. Claire laughed her signature laugh, the one that sounds like it belongs in a TED Talk. And then she turned to me. So, what's new in your world? She asked, eyes twinkling. I opened my mouth. I was about to talk about a pilot documentary I had just started helping with. Before I could finish one sentence, she turned to Ryan. Oh, babe, did you tell them about your Tokyo trip? And just like that, I disappeared again. My parents never said they were disappointed in me, but they didn't have to. It was in the way they spoke about Claire with pride and about me with curiosity, like I was an art exhibit they couldn't quite interpret. Emily's always been different, my mom once said to a neighbor. Not special, not gifted, just different. They didn't see the woman I was becoming, because it didn't look like what they imagined. And that's when I stopped trying to explain it to them. I moved back to Portland quietly. No announcement, no fanfare. Just packed my things in a rented van and drove across the country. I found a small apartment above an old bookstore. The windows leaked in winter, and the heater groaned like it had arthritis. But I liked the smell of old paper and the feeling of being small but unseen. I started over. But no one noticed. No calls asking how the move went. No check-ins. Claire sent me a good luck with everything text, followed by a video of Ryan receiving a plaque for excellence in leadership. And still, I didn't hate her. She wasn't cruel, just wrapped in a world that clapped when she walked in. She had never known what it felt like to be overlooked. So how could she possibly recognize what I was building? Still, the silence hurt. But it taught me how to create without needing applause. I didn't start with a plan. I just needed something that felt like purpose again. The bookstore owner, a soft-spoken man named Leo with hands always covered in ink stains, offered me a part-time gig organizing their back room. No title, no upward ladder, just dust, boxes, and silence. I said yes, not because it was grand, but because it was real. And real was enough. That's where I met Ruth. She came in every Friday morning, a petite woman in her 70s with wild white curls and reading glasses that dangled from a string around her neck. She never left with books, only asked if someone could help her find things online. This machine hates me, she muttered once, holding up her smartphone like it had personally betrayed her. I offered to help. She looked surprised. You know how to work these things? I laughed softly. I don't know everything, but I know enough. So we sat by the counter as I showed her how to email her granddaughter. Her eyes lit up when the reply came through 5 minutes later. You brought my baby into my living room, she whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. It was the first time in months that I felt like I'd done something that mattered. From there, it grew not by design but by word of mouth. One Friday turned into 3. Then Ruth brought a friend. Then another. Soon, I had a folding table in the back room with 3 old laptops and a line of seniors wanting to learn how to connect with their families again. We started calling it Digital Rewind. A tiny idea in a dusty room. No money. No business plan. Just stories being rescued from silence. I began documenting some of their moments. Photos of Arthur, 81, FaceTiming his son in Seattle for the first time. A video of Marie learning how to order groceries online without having to walk through the rain. I'd post them to a little blog I created, mostly just for me, maybe for Ruth. But then something strange happened. A local journalist, a woman named Dana, who stumbled across my blog while researching tech accessibility, asked if she could feature us. I thought it would be a tiny blurb. It turned into a full Sunday column. The article exploded. Emails flooded in. Teachers, social workers, community centers, people who had seniors, grandparents, or just lonely neighbors needing help. People who didn't want to lose connection in a digital world that moved too fast. That week, a woman named Jasmine, who ran a senior center in the next neighborhood over, called and asked, "Can you bring Digital Rewind to us?" I said yes. Again, not because I was ready, but because it felt right. Before I knew it, I was spending 4 days a week at different community centers across Portland, teaching tech basics, helping them download apps, log into portals, FaceTime grandkids. And something strange started happening in me. The more I gave, the more whole I felt. No one there cared where I went to college. No one asked if I was settling. They just saw me. Me in the moment. Emily, patient, steady, kind. And for the first time in a long time, I liked the person I was becoming. There was one moment I'll never forget. Mr. Alvarez, a retired school janitor who barely spoke above a whisper, had been trying for weeks to get in touch with his son. He'd been estranged since a misunderstanding years ago. One afternoon, I helped him write a simple message through Facebook Messenger. "Just wanted to say I'm thinking of you. Hope you're okay." He hit send with trembling hands. 3 days later, his son replied, with a photo of his new baby. Mr. Alvarez didn't speak. He just held the phone against his chest and wept. It didn't make headlines, but it mattered. Every Friday, Ruth still came by. Sometimes with cookies. Sometimes just to sit. "You've created something, sweetheart," she said once. Something soft, but strong. And that was the moment I realized. I wasn't drifting. I was anchoring. Not in recognition, not in prestige, but in presence. And still, not one word from my sister. Not a question. Not even a curious text. My parents saw the article I knew they had. A friend of my mom's mentioned it to her at church. But when we spoke, she just said, "I saw your little column. That's nice. Helping old folks click buttons? Real noble work." I smiled. Because I knew what she didn't. I knew the ripple, the stories, the reunions, the healing. I knew the truth, even if they couldn't see it yet. Digital Rewind kept growing, not like a rocket, but like a tree, steady rooted. Within 6 months, we were in 5 senior centers. By the next year, we'd trained nearly 1,200 seniors per month. Most sessions were run by volunteers, high schoolers, tech-savvy retirees, college students looking to make a difference. I built a small team. Leo, the bookstore owner, became our unofficial advisor. Jasmine handled outreach. Ruth called herself Director of Vibes. We created simple tutorials with big fonts, plain language, and step-by-step photos. We didn't chase trends. We chased usefulness. Our email newsletter had a 78% open rate, higher than some Fortune 500 companies. People wrote back every week. Not with complaints, but with thanks. "Because of you, I FaceTimed my daughter before her wedding. I figure out how to watch old movies again. You gave me back my Saturday nights." I feel seen. We even got a small grant from a community foundation. It wasn't much, $8,000, but we used it to buy better equipment, build out a website, and pay our interns. I gave a short TEDx talk at a local university. Shared stories of transformation, of Ruth and Arthur and Mr. Alvarez. People clapped, cried, asked how they could help. One woman approached me after the talk, her voice trembling. "I didn't know connection could be taught like this. You're doing something sacred." I smiled, said thank you, and walked back to my car in silence. Grateful, quiet, whole. Still back home, I remained invisible. My mom called once to ask if I could send over the lasagna recipe Claire had used at Thanksgiving. You both used to love it, she said. Not a single word about the talk. Not even a question about how I was doing. Claire posted photos of her new condo in San Francisco, of Ryan receiving another award, this one from a regional leadership board. She captioned it, "So proud of my partner in purpose." I didn't comment, didn't like it, didn't feel jealous, either. Just distant. Like I was watching a movie in a language I no longer understood. A few months later, I ran into an old high school friend at a community event. "I saw your interview with KGW News," she said. "You're doing such incredible work. Has your family been supportive?" I paused, then smiled politely. "They know I'm busy." It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. One Sunday, while scrolling on Instagram, I came across a story Claire had posted. A boomerang of her and Ryan sipping wine on a rooftop. The caption read, "Married to brilliance. Couldn't imagine anyone more driven." That word stuck. Driven. She'd always used it like a compliment, like it was the measuring stick for worth. And for a while I believed it. Believed I had nothing to show because I didn't have the title, the paycheck, the accolades. But now, I looked at my volunteers, my team, the people we served, the voices that came back to life through our work. I wasn't driven. I was grounded. And maybe that was even better. But it still hurt that the people who shaped you could so easily look away. One evening, I called home just to check in. My dad picked up. "Hey kiddo, your mom's watching one of Claire's interviews online. She was on some leadership podcast. It's pretty good." I waited. "That's great," I said. He didn't ask what I'd done that week. Didn't ask if I was happy. Just said he'd call back. He didn't. I started journaling again. Not for clarity, I had that. But to remember. To write down the names, the faces, the moments I didn't want to forget. To remind myself that just because the world didn't clap didn't mean the music wasn't beautiful. There was one moment that sealed it for me. A man named Joseph, 89, stood up during a class and said, "I used to feel like life left me behind. But now I get to feel it catch up." That night, I sat in my car and cried. Not because I was sad, but because I finally understood. You can change the world quietly. You can heal what no one sees. And you don't need permission to matter. The invitation came in an email I almost missed. Subject line: Community Panel on Digital Inclusion, Special Feature. At first, I thought it was another small gathering. Maybe a local panel. I clicked it half asleep, sipping chamomile tea, already thinking of how to politely decline. But as I read further, I froze. The event was being held in Seattle. It was backed by a major nonprofit and hosted at a venue I'd only ever seen on TV, one of those high-ceilinged, glass-walled places with TED banners and sponsored coffee stations. They weren't asking me to attend. They were asking me to speak. Not as a tech expert, not as a policy advocate, but as the founder of Digital Rewind. I almost said no, because something in me still believed I wasn't enough. Still heard Claire's voice in the back of my mind. "You're sweet, Em, but it's not sustainable. You really think helping a few people check their email is changing the world?" But Jasmine grabbed my shoulders when I told her. "Emily," she said slowly, "you built something out of nothing. This is exactly where you belong." So I said yes. Booked a modest hotel. Printed my talking points on recycled paper. Packed my favorite shoes. Not the ones that made me look powerful, but the ones I could stand in without pain. The event was huge. Hundreds of people. Live stream cameras. Lanyards and lights and logos. I felt microscopic. But then I saw Ruth's email. She had replied to the invite I'd forwarded her with only 3 words. Stand in truth. So I did. My panel wasn't until the second day. On the first, I attended quietly. Took notes. Listened. Watched. It was in one of those breakout sessions, a casual roundtable discussion on tech accessibility, that it happened. We were split into small groups, just 8 or 9 of us, sharing stories of initiatives that had worked in our communities. Across from me sat a young woman in a green blazer. Bright eyes. Confident posture. She was introduced as Julia, Director of Innovation for a regional elder care organization. When it was her turn to share, she began casually. We've been using a model based on a program I came across about a year ago. It's called Digital Rewind. My chest tightened. I blinked. She kept talking, unaware. It's beautifully simple. Volunteers help seniors reconnect digitally. There's emotional intelligence built into the training, not just tech literacy. I don't know the founder personally, but it completely transformed how we approach outreach. She laughed lightly. I even stole their font choice for our welcome materials. The group chuckled. I didn't. My palms were damp.
My throat dry.
Someone turned to me and asked, Emily, have you heard of Digital Rewind? I opened my mouth, closed it again, then finally said, I might know a little about it. Julia leaned forward, curious. You've studied their work? I looked at her directly. I started it. The room went silent. One woman gasped. Julia's eyes widened in disbelief. Wait, you're Emily Carter? I nodded slowly. From Portland. She stood, walked around the table, and hugged me. Not a polite, professional hug,
But a real one.
the kind you give someone whose invisible labor just became visible. I've been quoting you for months, she whispered. You have no idea how many people you've helped. Later that evening, during the main networking session, Julia introduced me to people I'd only ever known through newsletters and bylines. Directors of national programs. People with LinkedIn followings in the tens of thousands.
They all wanted to know about me.
About Digital Rewind. Not the theory, not the press clips, but the heart of it. I told stories of Ruth, of Arthur, of the emails we got after every workshop. And they listened. Not distracted. Not scrolling. They listened. But the moment that really shifted everything came during the final panel. I was on stage, fourth from the left. Nervous but composed. We were asked to share a single moment from our work that changed everything. And I told the story of Mr. Alvarez. The text, the reply, the baby photo, the silence, the tears. And then I said, we didn't do it for headlines. We did it for healing, for connection, for every person who still believes it's too late. The room was silent. Then someone began clapping. Then more. Until the whole room stood. Not because I demanded attention, but because the truth walked in by itself and refused to stay quiet. Later that night, I sat on the edge of my hotel bed and stared at the ceiling. I thought of Claire, of Ryan, of the way she used to talk about status like it was oxygen. And I realized I had stopped breathing that air a long time ago. I didn't need their approval. The world had already voted. With letters, and emails, and faces lit up on flickering screens. And now, finally, someone they'd respect had seen me. When I got home from Seattle, Portland felt different. Not louder, not brighter, but clearer. The same trees lined the street. The same mailman waved. The same dog barked through the neighbor's fence. But I had changed. On my first day back at the center, Ruth looked at me and grinned. You glow, girl. Like someone who finally knows the sun was always hers. I laughed, brushing it off. But the truth was, I had felt something shift. It wasn't ego. It wasn't fame. It was settling into myself. Like my skin had finally caught up to my soul. The emails came slowly. Not from journalists or tech hubs, but from people who mattered. One from a woman in Michigan. My mom used to say, don't bother, I'm too old for this stuff. Now she FaceTimes her grandkids every Sunday. You gave her weekends back. One from a teenage boy in Austin. Volunteering with your program helped me understand my grandpa. I used to be embarrassed by how slow he moved. Now I call him every Friday. But the one that made me sit down mid-dishwashing came from my mom. Subject line. I watched it. The message was only a few lines. Claire sent me a link to your talk. I didn't know the work you were doing was like that. I guess I never asked. I'm sorry. That's it. No grand apology. No dramatic declaration. Just softness, where there used to be silence. And for the first time in years, I didn't want more. Didn't need to defend my path. Didn't crave her approval like a starving child. I just breathed. A week later, Claire called. I let it go to voicemail. Then listened to it in bed, half curled under the quilt my grandmother made. Hey,
So, I saw that panel you were on. I mean, wow. You were always the heart of this family.
I think I forgot that for a while. Anyway, Ryan wants to meet you, he said, and I quote, "Why didn't you tell me your sister was cooler than me?" She laughed nervously at the end. I didn't cry. I smiled. Because that was hers to carry now, not mine. Time didn't rewind. Our dynamic didn't flip overnight. But it evolved, quietly, steadily. Thanksgiving came. Claire brought a bottle of wine, like always. But this time, when she handed it to me, she said, "The founder of Digital Rewind should be the one to open this." Even my dad, halfway through his second slice of pie, looked up and said, "You know, I downloaded Zoom. Might let you teach me." And I said, "Only if you promise not to mute yourself halfway through."
We all laughed.
And I realized I didn't feel like the black sheep anymore.
Just me. Whole. Seen.
Enough. I didn't frame the apology note. Didn't turn the voicemail into a ringtone. But I kept them, tucked away in a drawer beside old birthday cards and my first digital rewind lesson plan. Not as proof, but as peace. And in the quiet that followed, I noticed something beautiful. I no longer measured my worth by what they missed, or what I had to prove, or how loudly I needed to be heard. I was no longer asking for a seat at their table. I'd built my own, and filled it with stories and screens and second chances. And people showed up. Every time. Not for performance, but for presence. If you've ever felt like the quiet one, if you've ever sat at a table where your name was known, but your worth was not, then this story was always meant for you. Not because it's extraordinary, but because it's familiar. Because somewhere out there, someone like you is still explaining their value to people who never saw them. Still shrinking themselves so others feel tall. Still dimming their light to make others comfortable. Let me tell you something I learned too late. You don't owe anyone smallness. You don't have to wait for the spotlight. You don't have to get their blessing. You don't have to earn love by staying quiet. Because the people who really see you, they show up without applause. They find you in the corners, in the quiet, in the work no one celebrates. And they say, "You've been shining this whole time. I just had to adjust my eyes." Maybe you're the artist in a family full of analysts. Maybe your kindness was mistaken for weakness. Maybe they always saw your potential, but never your pain. Maybe they said, "She's just sensitive. He's just figuring things out. They're always off doing their own thing." And maybe they were wrong. Or maybe they just never looked closely enough. I won't lie to you. Recognition doesn't always come wrapped in the voice you want to hear it from. Sometimes your biggest breakthrough won't happen at your family table. It'll happen in a coffee shop, or a community center, or a breakout panel in a city you almost didn't visit. And that's okay. Because the truth doesn't need validation. It just needs witnesses. So here's what I want to leave you with. If you're building something, keep going. If your work is invisible, remember, it's still impactful. If they forgot your name, remind yourself of it every morning until it sounds like power. And if you're still waiting for them to say, "I'm proud of you," say it to yourself first. Then say it again. Then say it loud enough that the silence breaks. I built Digital Rewind not to be seen, but to help others feel seen. And in doing so, I found myself. I didn't need to go viral.
I didn't need a fancy last name.
I just needed to believe that my story mattered, even if no one was clapping yet. And slowly, the world did clap. Not all at once. Not with confetti, but with letters and emails. And one stranger in a green blazer who reminded me, "Your work saved someone." And that's the only headline you need. So now I'll ask you, where are you watching from? What's the story they never let you tell? What dream did you bury because they laughed too soon?
Tell me.
Because someone out there needs to hear it.
Needs to know they're not the only one.
Needs proof that quiet victories are still victories. And this space, this channel, it's for you. Not the version they wanted. The version you fought to become. Thank you for listening. for staying, for holding this story in your heart, even if just for a while. There are more stories coming. More quiet revolutions. More names you've never heard, but will never forget. Until then, stay soft. Stay steady. And most of all, stay you. Because that is more than enough. It always was.